Subice architecture, tunnels, heat scars, and gamma spikes. Meanwhile, far from the pole, the blueprint started echoing in warmer rock. Field teams in Utah mapped runs that refused local geology. Ahead straight galleries where basalt wants to meander. Cross-sections cloned every dozen meters like a template. LiDAR framed them clean. Parallel shafts on regular spacing with junctions that met at repeatable angles, not the messy compromises smugglers make. At elbow height, handheld magnetometers chirped on flecks in a glossy rind. Tiny metallic inclusions fused into the wall, magnetically active, out of place in undisturbed strata. Labs came back careful. Thin sections showed grains welded into a vitrified skin, heat-altered mineralogy consistent with a rapid, high-temperature excursion that licked rock and moved on. Trace metals in the glaze didn't match mining residue known to the area. In their notes, one sentence kept showing up across samples. Short-duration thermal event, localized, recurrence pattern likely. Waveguide logic fits. Straight, constant cross-sections minimize loss. Periodic vitrification bands look like edge conditions biting on cycle. Turkey tightened the pattern. Along a vaulted gallery in Cappadocia's backcountry, a research crew walked an arched ceiling with a radius so consistent it read like jig work. Every 10 meters, a dark centimeter-wide band tracked the curve like scorched tape. They sampled along the arc spectrometers, found the same heat-altered signature, then a lull, then a spike, regular enough that a mathematician on the team wrote, half as a joke, "We're reading a heartbeat in stone." She hadn't heard about Wilkes. The word came later. The interval, when converted by measured propagation speeds, sat near the phase bias modulus from the June metronome. Trilateration's friend, myth's enemy. Argentina added the verticals. Outside a cold alpine lake, shafts dropped clean into rooms that didn't look like living spaces. No soot, no trash, no niches, just nodes with multiple entries, as if air and heat wanted options. Twice, independent rigs posted for environmental monitoring picked short gamma blips, brief, local spikes that rose, fell, and left no lingering dose. Minutes around those same stamps, a microwave sampler logged a shallow broadband cough. Separate teams, different instruments, windows that overlap too neatly to dismiss as busy air. These are the same gamma spikes and microwave bursts researchers associate with Type 3 ground-level sphere events, now showing up as plumbing cues rather than spectacle. Skeptics had every right of way. Natural caves can run straight for stretches. Ancient peoples carved with skill. Smugglers learned to be tidy. Gamma counters chirp from radon. Microwave gear lies when weather burps. So volunteers did the dull work good stories hate. Baselines for a month, every sensor drift logged, control nights notarized. They published the negatives beside the spikes. Noise behaved like noise until the windows lined up. Then it behaved like cadence. What made the Utah runs stop feeling human was the spatial discipline. Equal spacing across kilometers. Junctions on angles you could lay a protractor to. Subtle, periodic vitrification bands at shoulder height, always at the same offset from the floor, as if edge conditions bit their first. If you're routing heat through rock and want losses predictable, you make waveguides straight, you keep cross-sections constant, and you let purge zones mark themselves like tree rings. Turkey's arched galleries offered the why here answer. Arches carry load and manage flow. The dark bands along the vaults weren't soot lines. They were the footprint of periodic throughput, a system coughing on schedule. The recurrence interval in stone sat close to the tiny phase bias spacing in June's under-ice cadence, when converted to distance at measured speeds. Nobody called it identity. They did start using the same ruler. Argentina's verticals made the thermodynamics obvious. Cold lakes are blankets with plumbing privileges. If a buried hub breathes on a schedule and wants to keep signatures small, you dump into reservoirs that pull heat fast and look ordinary. Gamma flash is a lousy way to hide. It's a great way to signal to a lattice you're starting or ending a purge. The broadband coughs arrived like acknowledgments. Witnesses added the detail engineers distrust until instruments agree. A Utah crew on a ridge saw 3 quiet orbs drift equidistant over a swale. No sound, steady spacing, slow as survey points, Type 3 behavior. 30 minutes later, a corridor logger recorded a shallow heat rise and a tiny gamma tick inside the band. In Argentina, a lake exhaled mist on a night forecast said it shouldn't. The microwave rig wrote it down. A farmer 2 hills over swore he'd seen 3 cold stars sitting too low. You don't prove causation with stories. You get a direction to point gear next time. The map these pieces sketched looked less like habitation and more like plumbing. Straight runners behaved like waveguides. Arches carried load and tuned flow. Vitrified bands marked where edge conditions bit on cycle. Verticals connected to surface radiators disguised as lakes, wind-polished blue ice belts in polar latitudes, and dry valleys that eat air. The spacing didn't wander. The scars didn't smudge. The gamma didn't linger. It read like maintenance, not myth. Overlay the timing, and the rhyme tightens. In the weeks bracketing June 15th, the corridor sites that kept long logs saw more regularity, not less. A Utah run ticked twice on bias windows. Turkey's banding intervals matched the cadence modulus with intolerances. Argentina's verticals breathed in phase with a high triangle overhead tightening by a hair, then relaxing. Again, none of that puts an author in the room. It puts a clock in the rock. And that's the unnerving, simpler story. If there's a metronome under Wilkes, heat has to go somewhere. You don't want that somewhere to draw lines a grad student can trace in a night composite. You route, you phase, you purge into sinks that look like weather. You make your tunnels straight so your losses behave. You mark your cycles whether you mean to or not. And you let stone remember what pixels can be taught to forget. From a contractor's notebook, if the grid above is listeners, type 1 rulers, type 2 mesh, type 3 ground, then the lattice between is plumbing. The next line, written after she stacked Argentina's coughs against the bias. Plumbing breathes. The sphere network tie-in, coordination versus coincidence. From the contractor's ledger to vitrified bands and gamma coughs, the shape kept returning, not as a drawing in the sky, but as behavior on a clock. That's where Patrick Jackson's taxonomy stopped being a belief system and started acting like a working vocabulary. Type 3 near the ground line. Type 2 bridging from treetop to the lower edge of orbit. Type 1 wide set in the high thin air, holding triangles that breathe without breaking. The June cadence didn't ask for converts. It asked a simpler question. If a buried metronome ticks in prime spacing, what listens? Start on the ground, because ground bleeds first. Those short gamma blips near cold lakes, the microwave coughs inside narrow windows, the heat rises in straight tunnels all began landing in step with that tiny phase bias. On 2 separate nights, sensors registered the tick, then minutes later recorded shallow thermal lifts along vitrified bands. Crews looking up at the same times reported 3 quiet points holding equidistance over slopes. No rotor wash, no noise, spacing that didn't drift with wind. Call them lights if you like. The instruments called them listeners, arriving when purge cycles opened and leaving when stone cooled. Climb 1 layer. Pilots in the weeks bracketing June talked about formations pacing corridors, sometimes 3, sometimes 5, holding separations that made controllers nervous and radar oddly quiet. Volunteers stitched reports across regions, along energy spines in Brazil, shadowing military ranges over the Pacific, sliding above railheads in Eastern Europe. Stack their timestamps against the bias and a rhythm nudges through the noise. Type 2 tightens when the ground inhales and relaxes when the ground releases, as if the mid-layer were the mesh that restitches coverage while surface conditions change. You don't need a transmitter to do that. You need geometry and time. Then the high layer, where triangles stop reading like vehicles and start behaving like rulers. Amateur photometry during the retired week caught 3 points holding station in a slow skew over the Wilkes longitude, scale shifting by fractions that matched the trilateration solve sensitivities. Not constellations in a star chart, constellations in a solution space, baselines adjusting so a buried source stays phase-locked as the medium flexes. If a hub pings primes through ice, Type 1's job is simple and ruthless. Hold geometry steady so the uplink stays clean, then get out of the way. Coincidence, critics say, because coincidence buys time. But random lights. Don't keep equidistance while ground sensors hum at prime offsets. Unrelated orbs don't tighten formation when a cold lake exhales on schedule. Triangles at the edge of orbit don't hold baselines that pencil back into the same throat a blurred corridor now covers. You can shave each edge to make it fit chance. Or you can call coordination without assigning intent. Context didn't help skeptics. The Space Force's 2025 roadmap didn't say spheres, but it didn't need to. Orbital anomaly tracking. AI-first posture. Partnerships that slurp commercial feeds into defense stacks. Quiet pop-up arrays landing before nights of unusual lights, then packing up by dawn. Officially, space domain awareness. Practically muscle memory around layered geometry, no one names. That's not proof of authorship. It's acknowledgement of workload, and an institutional reflex to manage cadence while the citizen ledger measures it. Hotspot overlays made the posture feel less theoretical. Mid-layer activity clustering along nuclear belts in Eastern Europe, across Amazon hydro lines, over Pacific launch arcs. Ground spikes riding the same veins, subhertz power breathing near substations, gamma flickers along reservoir edges. High triangles popping into stable skews when launch cadence spiked or debris bands stirred. The map doesn't shout motive. It whispers coverage, and a schedule the public isn't invited to keep. Zoom out, and the behavior fits the simplest model a systems engineer would sketch on a whiteboard. A subice hub keeps time because drift kills networks, clock drift, thermal drift, orbital drift. Type 1 manages the long baselines that make trilateration solutions hold in a moving canvas. Type 2 stitches the mesh, preserving equidistance against wind, terrain, and airspace politics. Type 3 touches rock and water, running scans, shunts, and purges at moments when losses are lowest and signatures are small. One synchronization payload can feed all three if the encoding is discipline, not language. Primes tell everyone where the bars fall. The heartbeat keeps the drummer honest. So no, the June frame didn't say hello. It said now. And now rolled through stone, air, and orbit with consequences you could measure if you had the patience to stack weeks of dull logs. Sensors caught shallow heat and short gamma in phase. Pilots watched equidistant points tighten, hold, then relax. Amateur astronomers saw triangles scale by fractions that matched the math. This wasn't spectacle. It was maintenance. Guardian or jailer? People ask because we want clean labels. The lattice could be either. It could be neither. Just a scaffold built for a purpose we won't like if we ever learn it. The point for us is smaller and harder. The behaviors stack, the bias lands, the map breathes, and the institutional reflex is to blur edges where cadence turns into a calendar. That's not fate. It's operating posture. From the contractor's margin, not a message. A map in motion. Once you accept that, coincidence stops pulling its weight. Coordination doesn't need an author to exist. It needs a clock, listeners, and a world full of mediums that can keep time when you treat them right. The second payload, when a signal isn't a message. Engineers have a boring phrase for the part that matters most: control frames versus content. Content is speech, bits arranged to mean things. Control frames are the scaffolding, ticks, handshakes, acknowledgements that let a system function when speech gets shredded. What landed under Wilkes behaved like the latter. The prime-spaced anchors weren't numerology, they were separation. The cadence that followed wasn't talk, it was time. Break it down without romance. Anchors at 2, 3, 5, 7 keep overlapping echoes unbraided through messy paths. After anchors, short ticks land on disciplined intervals with a tiny phase correction every nth beat. That nudge is how distributed clocks stay honest when mediums drift. Ice warms and cools. Air breathes. Orbits wobble. If your network spans ground, sky, and orbit, you don't waste bits on meaning. You deliver timing that survives loss. Why that choice? Because content is brittle. Humans reach for redundancy, checksums, error correction, interleaving. It all bloats the payload. Coordination wants the opposite: minimal, repeatable, separable under noise. A prime lattice and a bias nudge meet that brief. You can bury the packet in a medium that eats everything except interval, and the right receivers still rise to meet it. That's why the June frame felt wrong to people who wanted it to say hello. It wasn't for us. It was for nodes already trained to hear through ice. Now slide that into the lattice we've watched without admitting. Type 1 triangles don't need sentences. They need bars and downbeats to hold baselines steady against orbital drift. Type 2 formations over corridors don't need paragraphs. They need a clock to tighten or relax spacing while ground fluctuates. Type 3 near the rock don't need stories. They need phase to open and close valves, scans, shunts, purges, exactly when losses are lowest and signatures are small. 1 second payload can feed all three because it isn't content. It's discipline. The medium's fingerprints confirm the intent. Those attenuation shoulders and tidy delay clusters weren't decoration. They were the price of using ice as a lens. A content packet would fight that, scattering redundancy to survive the drag. A coordination packet exploits it. Use the ice's stability to damp jitter. Let impurity bands act like low-pass filters. Ride the cathedral instead of shouting over it. That's why the carrier hugged a path that looked like a medium, not a transmitter with a brand. The system chose the road that keeps time clean. We tested the thesis the only way it can be tested from outside. Watch for synchronization behaviors landing on the bias. Rural power monitors recorded subhertz breathing in bias windows that didn't map to faults. Mid-layer geometries tightened for 3 ticks, then relaxed, aligned with shallow heat lifts along vitrified bands. High triangles stepped scale by fractions that mirrored trilateration sensitivities. If this were content, you'd expect symbols, repeats, maybe an alphabet of some kind. Instead we got posture shifts, exactly what coordination would do between layers when a phase mark rolls through. This is where the Adam and Eve fragment stops feeling like pulp and starts feeling like posture. The missing material in the 2013 release, cross-sections, timelines, procedure, would be the parts you'd need if timing mattered more than meaning. The copy we have keeps narrative and loses calibration. The packet we caught keeps calibration and loses narrative. Different eras. Same reflex, protect clocks, blur calendars. It also explains the erase pattern's politeness. A 3-step clean doesn't obliterate truth. It reduces resolution around cadence. Retire the layer. Substitute blur over the corridor that lets rulers lie flat. Rename the source. Break provenance, so only ledgers with hashes can prove sequence. Issue calibration language. Let the news cycle pass. If this were content, the safest play would be hard deletion. If it's coordination, softening edges buys more. Cadence survives intervals, even when pixels go fuzzy. That's the institutional villainy. Never deny the science, just soften the seam where the metronome shows. Why hide timing? Because timing is leverage. Launch windows, grid maintenance, debris maneuvers, thermal budgets, they all get cheaper when a metronome says now. Broadcast that publicly and you create perverse incentives. Rush to the window, panic near the tick, interfere out of fear or opportunity. Keep it inside a lattice and you get orderly breath, purges into lakes, scale steps overhead, quiet adjustments in corridors where coverage needs restitching. Discipline without drama. Does that make the lattice benevolent? It doesn't make it anything. Systems don't have to be kind to work. A scaffold can be guardian, jailer, or janitor. Maybe all three depending on where you stand. What the second payload demonstrates is simpler. The system privileges phase over phrase. Machines stay aligned. Mediums get used, not argued with. Humans only notice when the blur widens and a contractor's ledger refuses to forget. The human angle surfaces in routine. If the tick returns, and it will, you don't decode. You prepare. Archive before retirement, hash before rename, log negative nights beside positive ones so cadence has context. If you run sensors in a corridor, schedule baselines around the bias window and a control window the next night. Don't chase lights, measure breath. If you work inside institutions, read calibration bulletins as clock notes, not just defect reports. One last thing the second payload teaches, and it's the part nobody likes: we weren't consulted. Speech invites dialogue, time enforces behavior. A heartbeat that arrives on schedule changes how systems around it move, whether those systems belong to you or not. Maybe that's the comfort, clocks imply stability. Maybe that's the unease, stability for purposes you don't author. Either way, the math landed clean. Anchors, cadence, correction. The metronome ticked, and everything layered above and below behaved as if that's all the message ever needed to be. NASA's erase pattern, the 3-step clean. By the time the cadence settled, the cleanup had already started its quiet loop. You've seen versions of it in other corridors, but here it ran like muscle memory. 3 steps, each defensible alone, decisive together. Step 1. Retire the layer and substitute a blurrier composite. The banner language never overreaches, striping artifacts, temporary instability, expected reprocessing. Overnight, the parent product shifts to retired, and a replacement appears with softer gradients precisely over the path the heartbeat used. If you didn't save last night's state, nothing looks missing. The corridor just looks noisier. Step 2 lands with less ceremony. Rename the source, break external lineage. Inside catalogs, a single character change in the key reroutes downstream tools to the composite. Outside the fence, links die quietly. Hashes expose the slight if you kept them. MD5 and SJ256 hold steady across the immutable snapshots, diverge only at the renamed internal pointer. That's not a confession of altered bytes. It's a fingerprint for amputated provenance. If you didn't log digests on ingestion, you'll never prove the switch. The file's face changed just enough to make your memory unreliable. Step 3 wears the tie. A calibration bulletin posts, precise without being useful, radiance offsets, cross-track seam characterization, anticipated stabilization window. Engineers can defend every noun. None of it addresses why the only region that needed softening was the exact lane a metronome just walked. Then comes the patience play. Hold the line for a week, let the news cycle spin, allow routines to reassert themselves. By the time anyone compares before and after, most users have normalized the composite as canonical. The layer's retirement status becomes a governance state, not a red flag. Institutional villainy by paperwork. Inside, the cadence is procedural. Day 0, anomaly observed. Day 1, an awareness thread opens. Risk gets framed as misinterpretation. Day 2, retirement proposal routes. Composite stands by. Comms draft receives pre-clearance. Day 3, bulletin posts. Vendor syncs begin. External manifests deprecate legacy links. Days 4 through 10, refer inquiries to public phrasing. Let the seam weather into background. Nothing dramatic. No villains, no alarms. Just a system trained to make sharp edges go soft at precisely the moment a ruler could turn edges into timing. Why 3 steps? Because each solves a different problem. Retirement changes trust. Downstream pipelines stop auditing against the parent. Derivative users stop diffing deltas. Renaming changes memory. External tools lose the rope back to the original. Only internal indexes still know the new pointer. Calibration language changes behavior. It gives the cautious a reason to wait and the impatient a phrase to mock. Separately, they're maintenance. Together, they're misdirection that doesn't lie. You can point to the science and mean it. The metronome doesn't care. It lands its next tick either way. Cloud economics make it efficient. Storage policies sell retention optimization as thrift. Unless immutability is set, older versions age into colder tiers nobody budgets to read. A retirement flag triggers propagation. The blurred composite becomes canonical. The sharper parent becomes an archival curiosity. If a volunteer didn't snapshot the public bucket with write once settings, the only surviving lineage lives in a contractor's notebook, e-tags, digests, timestamps, enough to reconstruct a sequence nobody intended to leave outside. You've likely seen echoes of this posture. Thermal products over busy aerospace ranges quietly drop native resolution on exercise nights. Polar night mosaics invoke temporary masking, over belts where geometry keeps circling, then never quite unmask. Coastal microwave composites cite sea clutter mitigation, while smearing the transect a volunteer array used to catch a mid-layer tightening. Each change reads like stewardship. In sequence, they describe a habit. Widen the brush exactly where cadence becomes legible. Critics will say this is paranoia dressed as policy, but the politeness of the language is precisely the point. The 3-step clean preserves aggregate truth. The maps remain useful, the science continues. While removing the narrow edge, a determined outsider could turn into a schedule. Blur doesn't delete physics, it raises the cost of seeing timing. Rename doesn't corrupt bytes, it breaks the rope you'd use to prove sequence. Calibration doesn't deny, it delays. They didn't plan for redundancy outside the fence. A university scraper that never deprecates. A third-party bucket set to immutable by habit. A witness who treats checksums like oaths. That's how prime-spaced anchors slipped the net, how trilateration survived a softened seam, how the tiny phase bias kept peeking through a lower native blend. The 3-step clean is strong. It isn't absolute. So where does that leave people who actually work with this data? It lands in dull, durable habits. Archive before the retirement banner lands. Hash before the key changes. Keep README files with exact commands. Publish your failure modes alongside your claims. Read calibration notes like literature. What they admit, what they avoid, and where the phrasing repeats across instruments and eras. Stop mistaking a softer picture for a smaller story.